Welcome back to Manga Historian's One Piece Reading Hour. Today we're going to be looking at the finale of Dressrosa. If this is your first time joining us, I have started reading One Piece at the beginning of 2023, and we are now in 2024, and I have officially finished 800 chapters of One Piece, because the One Piece is real! That's right, I've done 800 chapters in an entire year. I try to do 30 chapters in a bulk, and sometimes it's more, sometimes it's less. But today we're going to be talking about chapters 760 to 800. That's right. You haven't seen a video over the course of December for the most part because I had COVID and then I was recovering and then we went into the holidays. So it took me a while to actually read through all 40 chapters. And I didn't want to end this at 790 and come back later because I was like, that'll be really lame. Let's just do all 40 and we'll wrap up Dressrosa officially. So since this took me longer than normal and my memory is not what it used to be, there's a lot of holes in it. It's like Swiss cheese. I've got my notes to kind of go over how I felt at different moments. So today's going to be a little different because the earliest notes for this segment go back to December 17th. I'm going to try to remember what I was writing in these segments, and we're going to talk about that. Because overall, where we are in the story is Law has been captured by Doflamingo. Luffy is on his way over there. Rebecca is currently trying to fight her way up there. She doesn't know who Kyros is yet. Zoro is battling against the giant stone guy, and he's lost like always. And the other half of the crew has left, or they're going to be leaving very soon. That I want to talk about that, actually, because I'm pretty sure I don't have no notes on them, which means... yeah, and Robin. Robin's here too. So it's Robin, Zoro, and Luffy, and then the new cast. So first off, to me, the cast separating in this manner and what they ended up doing felt a little weird. It felt like Oda realized he wanted to introduce a lot of characters, a lot of new people, all a part of this new alliance that gets announced at the end of this little segment of stuff. So he wanted to make sure they were all announced. He wanted to focus on the story of the soldier and Rebecca. He wanted to focus on the backstory of Doflamingo and Law. And the easiest answer was to remove, I guess, some of the not important characters, which I hate to say. I really hate to say it that way, because Nami's an important character. Brook's an important character. Usopp's an important character, but they all kind of got shoved off to the side to do this side battle on the boat, and then they were quickly kind of kicked off. They were just like, "You're done. Go. It's over. You're sailing away." I honestly can't even remember where they're going. I just assume it's somewhere they got to meet up with the rest of the crew. But where I started at 760, as usual, I stopped and made my review before things got interesting when we discovered the origins of Law. So Doflamingo really wanted to get back into the Celestial Dragons. That was his whole goal. As a child, his dad decided to break away from the Celestial Dragons, but because of what his family has done, the civilians were not having it. I found that to be really interesting, that this was his backstory, that his dad turned out to be a good guy who didn't want to live the life of the Celestial Dragons. The Celestial Dragons seem to be getting more and more important, and once Doflamingo was announced to be a part of them, I'm like, okay, they're definitely going to be way more important than they're even coming across now, and they already come across as important characters. So that's kind of how I felt about that. His history was interesting because, then once they were getting beat up by everyone and the dad realized that his family was getting mistreated because they were once Celestial Dragons, or they actually still are, but they were used to be treated as that. He tried to go back only to get beaten and tortured by the Celestial Dragons. And then Doflamingo's actual plan to be to become the guy he's supposed to be, to earn his birthright. We find out much later in these chapters that the crew, the initial 4 guys, are the ones that kind of picked up Doflamingo and decided okay, we're going to make you better. We're going to make you stronger. We're going to turn you into the person we want you to be, the pirate captain, the leader of Dressrosa, all this stuff. So it was interesting to see Doflamingo's origin and how he became what he is. They also reveal at this point that Law's ultimate power, the power of the Op fruit, is to sacrifice the life of the Op user and then give somebody else immortality. That's Law's fruit's superpower. And they also go into the fact that Trophy's middle name is D. Just like Monkey D. Luffy, we got Trafalgar D. Law. I think that's how it flows, but his middle name is D. We then also go into Law's history. Now, I know in the last video I said I really didn't find Law's history to be too interesting. That's because we didn't get to the actual origin. What they showed before was that Doflamingo kind of picked him up and he joined the crew and he was a part of that whole thing. And that was fine. I liked that. But it wasn't deep. It wasn't sad. It wasn't interesting. Now we get to the sad part of his story. His sister got this white sand or white cement, some kind of weird disease from their town. He also has it. He gets picked up by Doflamingo because of his hatred. Doflamingo saw himself in the law, like his younger self, the full of hatred, wanting to fix his life, fix things that are going on, stuff like that in law. So he did that. He picked him up, put him onto the crew, and then we discovered that he was just kind of a butthead, but he knew he was going to die in 5 years. He was going to basically do whatever he can. Doflamingo promised they were going to try to cure him. I don't know if, his original goal was to do that or if he was just trying to get Law on his team. It doesn't really matter because that's when we discovered the character Korra, Doflamingo's brother, I believe, or cousin. It was family, but I think it was his brother. So Korra decides, Korra is a mute character who has the ability to create silence wherever he goes. And Law discovers that he can actually talk, and they end up blackmailing each other into working together. And this was my question back at this point, that Korra, for some reason, when he found out that Trafalgar D. Law was a D, wanted to help him. And it didn't make a lot of sense to me that Korra was protecting this kid in the way that he was just because he had a D. I'm like, is the D really that important? Now, in my notes, I remember writing this towards the back half where we do discover Korra's reason. It's not a good reason. Not like Korra's reasoning is so solid. It turns out Korra was working against the family, the Flamingo family, and because of that, he was working with the Navy and feeding them information. The admiral that he was working with questioned Law the same thing that I questioned. Why did Korra give everything up about this mission to help you? And the answer was, the question was answered as that Law reminded Korra of Doflamingo as a kid, and he knows that Doflamingo got ruined by everything going on, so he doesn't want him to become that. He didn't want Law to become what Doflamingo became. So it's an okay answer. I feel Law, if he was obviously working behind the scenes, he had a lot going on. I don't think he should have thrown it all away for Law, but that's the story of One Piece, right? People make friends, they help them out no matter what's going on, and they'll stick through thick and thin. Well, Korra eventually got the op-out fruit to Law. Law could use that to heal himself. It was the fruit that everybody wanted because of its ability to give eternal life, and that's when Doflamingo realized that Korra was betraying him, and the story was great. I actually really did like the story once we actually got into it and what was going on, as opposed to the prior story of, well, Law's just with Doflamingo. This was much better. We go back to the main story. Zoro is just being awesome. I know some of you guys commented that I didn't comment on Zoro before. It's because Zoro just did what Zoro does. Zoro was just lost in Dressrosa. He eventually ran into Luffy because, what was going on, but he was on his own little adventure trying to get his sword back, which was awesome and fun, but it didn't really stand out to me as being anything over the top. Zoro gets into this battle, and I'm just going to go through the whole thing with the Zoro battle. We'll just cut this portion out, because Zoro's whole portion of this story is him fighting this guy that can turn into stone and becomes a giant, and he's decimating Dressrosa. It turns into everyone having to team up, Zoro being more amazing than ever before. It eventually boils down to Zoro slicing the stone guy in various points, forcing the stone guy to move around until Zoro can get him. It was awesome, and I maintain Zoro is probably still my number one favorite. Even when he does a minor role, like just spending the entire arc in a battle or lost, he still does it in just an amazing way, okay? We did a few things with the side cast here, which I still am not a fan of, and I'm still not a fan of, even though we discover what their point was by the end of this. Old Man dies of old age. Don Shin broke the drill head and his title. Old Man then wrecked him. I agree the length is a problem as it's coming out. So, I wanted to talk about this, and I put the note here to remind me. Like I said, this has been over the course of 4 weeks because of the holidays, because of COVID. So, obviously, I have some notes in here for myself. A lot of you guys commented that the length was terrible, and you know what? You're right. Right now, I hate My Hero Academia, and that's because it is taking forever to get to the point of what is going on. I cannot imagine how annoyed I would have been reading 100 chapters of Dress Rosa, only to have whole chapters dedicated to Don Chin fighting an old man with his drill head, or Bartholomew going crazy because Robin winked at him, only to then cut like everyone's running to fight Doflamingo for the entire 100 chapters. Like, I would be so annoyed because that's exactly what is going on in My Hero Academia, and I love My Hero Academia. This arc needs to end, okay? It needs to come to an end. So I can imagine all of you guys reading 100 chapters of them just dragging out the final fight for the exact same thing. We cut to Cabbage, had an alter ego. Cavendash is his real name. Cabbage is what Robin and Luffy were calling him. He has like this crazy alter ego that's like barely explained or explored, so I'm assuming that is coming back. Cavendash, he's a part of the fleet, which gets formed over the ending, so I'm assuming that's going to come back somewhere and be more important. Also, Mancheri, I thought was fake. Mancheri's actually a healer, and that's why they were holding on to her. That's great. I was wondering what her entire deal was, and she was super cute with her constant, like, lisp that she had going on. I found that fun. We then go to Senora Pink. Said, hard-boiled. Mr. Frankie versus Senor Pink, the hard-boiled. Oh, yeah, was Frankie on the island the whole time, or did he leave with the crew eventually? I don't know, but Frankie was fighting Senor Pink. Senor Pink is a guy wearing a baby outfit, and they all called him hard-boiled, and he was supposed to be a man's man in his baby outfit. And I just thought Oda was being weird, and then he gave the man in a baby costume a sad, heartfelt story. What is with Oda and making me want to cry about everyone in this story? It's just amazing how good he is at doing this. Not much more to say about that. Robin threw everything, risked herself to save Rebecca by throwing up her hands, got all the stuff in her back. I thought Robin might have been close to dying. I didn't think she was going to die, but I thought she might have been close to dying. Only for this, her whole back is bloodied up to kind of be shrugged off, and she just joins the rest of the crew again. I'm like, I wrote it here in caps. Robin's back is riddled with the spikes. And okay, but she got better. I was just like, okay. Zoro's still fighting Pika. Zoro cut a mountain. I put that in here. Bellamy had to come and fight Luffy. Luffy called him a friend, which was a very pivotal moment for Bellamy in general. This whole arc of the way he started all the way back before Skypiea. They also got me with a red herring. Law was dead, but then he wasn't dead. I even wrote, Law is dead, question mark, question mark, question mark. Law is not dead. That's what I wrote in the notes. I also apologize if my eyes are going back and forth right now. I've moved the camera, if you haven't been able to tell. I think this angle looks and works better, but at the same time, I'm getting used to where it's at. I keep glancing at myself over here, and I'm also glancing at where the camera used to be. So then we finally get to the Luffy, Law, and Doflamingo fight. Luffy catches Doflamingo's foot. I thought that was an awesome scene, awesome artwork for it. It just really stood out to me. And then we go into cliffhanger with Luffy announcing Gear 4. How did that feel? I want to know a legit question here to you, the audience. How did that feel reading that as it was coming out? For him to announce Gear 4 and then cliffhanger. And I don't know if this happened, but I feel like it probably happened on some kind of a hiatus where you had to wait a month to find out what Gear 4 was. My immediate reaction to Gear 4 was, WTF was that? I don't know if I like Gear 4. Bouncy Boy. It's weird looking. He's like a cartoon. He just bounces around, launching arms, launching legs. The power is incredible, but it's weird. Now, I want to say I do really like that Gear 2, Gear 3, and Gear 4 are all completely different. I love Dragon Ball Z Super and the original, but my biggest complaint about the transformations is everyone gets hyped up for a new transformation, and all it is Goku moving faster and hitting harder. I like that Luffy's Gear 2, 3, and 4 are completely different fighting styles and different. Gear 2, he's faster, can hit a little bit harder. Gear 3 is all about the giant size moves, and then Gear 4 is Bouncy Boy, which I don't know if I like. The design looks to me kind of like the new Frankie design that I hate, but whatever. At the same time, Sabo shows back up. I don't know how I feel about Sabo. He feels like replacement Ace to me because they literally gave him Ace's powers. He's literally doing what Ace did all the way back in Alabasta. So I don't know how I feel about Sabo right now. If he becomes more important, cool, but right now it just feels like the decision was to kill Ace for a big pivotal sad moment and get the crew moving. And then they realized, well, crap, we need another brother, which would explain when we got the backstory of Luffy. And I was like, who's this Sabo guy? Where did he come from? Oh, well, you had to make a new brother to replace Ace. That would make sense. At this point, the story is just stalling as everyone is gathering in the middle. Once again, must have been torture reading this as it came out. I don't know if I want to catch up to One Piece, guys. I might, when we get to the current arc, wait until that arc ends and then do this kind of a thing, because I think I'll just get annoyed like I am with My Hero Academia if it just takes 5 years to get through everything. At this point, like, Luffy, I didn't write it in here, but I remember it. Bouncy Boy burned out. He beat Doflamingo. But then he with one last hit, but Doflamingo survived. And it was told that if he can survive 10 minutes, that he is going to 10 minutes, 10 straight minutes, if they can keep him alive, that he will finish Doflamingo with Bouncy Boy a second time. I hated it. I hated that whole segment because it made no sense. And it must have been even worse reading it as it came out, because we beat him. We beat Doflamingo. And then we go into this like 2 or 3 chapter spread where everyone is cheering for Luffy. And there's like a side story where Rebecca's going to fight against Viola because they're being controlled by Doflamingo as he's waiting for Luffy. None of this needed to be dragged out at this point, in my opinion. This is my opinion. The Viola-Rebecca thing could have been peppered into any of these previous dragouts that we had. Everyone cheering for Lucy could have happened when he turned into Bouncy Boy. I don't know why we stretched this out just a few more chapters, because the final fight against Doflamingo was just that. There was no fight to it. And that was it. Like, that was the resolution. And I was like, what? That was a waste of like 5 or 6 chapters. You just dragged it out. I don't even know why you dragged it out, but you just dragged it out. So that was it. It was over. The story was wrapped up. And then we got our post stuff. Now, I really enjoyed, I didn't make a note for it in here, but it just stood out to me. The moment that Rebecca was like, she was gonna get killed and Kira showed up and she called him soldier and then she yelled out father. That moment really just moved me. I loved it. And Kyrus Rebecca, I love that pairing, which really worked for the finale over here, because in the finale, Luffy wasn't cool with Kyrus trying to cut ties from Rebecca. He wanted to cut all ties so that she could go back to her royal life, only for Luffy to drag Rebecca out of the castle, drag her to her father so that she can be alone with him, and they can just be a father-daughter combo. And it was just so sweet and so touching and so Luffy to be like, no, I don't like this. I'm bringing you over here. We're doing this. He had to fight against the blind swordsman, which he pitied, which I thought was so Luffy, to yell out what he's doing to this blind swordsman who's already proven to be like insanely powerful. But Luffy doesn't accept that. He wants the swordsman to have a fair fight with him. So he's calling out his moves. Such a Luffy thing. And then the town protects Luffy from the Navy because he had to recover. And then we turn into the fleet thing. Now, the fleet thing, I like the concept. It makes sense to me. Because if he's going to be the king of the pirates and he's going to make this big of an impact in the world, it would make sense that a fleet of other pirates would want to team up with Luffy and follow him. It also makes sense that Luffy wouldn't want to be the captain of this fleet because it would completely change his character and his motivations. It would also change things. It'd be like Luffy going from being the adventurer to management. He'd have to start running this fleet. And even if he barely did it, it would always be there in the background. So I really like the thing that they've done where they're all following Luffy, but they're not. They can just call on each other to help each other out. I like the idea. In terms of the people that were chosen, like Cavendish and, I think Bartholomew's there and Bellamy maybe. I don't care about the people that got chosen. I don't care about how they participated. I liked the message. I liked that Zoro drank the drink before Luffy could get to it. That was a great little side touch thing. But yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how the fleet plays out. I feel like it's a good... I don't know if I'm right or wrong, because obviously I've not read past at chapter 800, but I do feel like it's going to be interesting because it depends on how they're going to handle the fleet. If they're ever even going to show up, if they're just going to be there when needed, what's going to happen, I don't know. So I like the idea. And my last note here was Kyrus finally getting to hold Rebecca's hand. Just loved that moment, as the whole story of the soldier, her father tried to protect her as a toy. She doesn't even know he exists, only for the ending for him to finally be with his daughter and feel her hand. it was just nice. It was nice. I'm getting misty-eyed just thinking about it. So, but that's where we are. We have wrapped it up, and I am still so hooked and enjoying One Piece. Look at this. You guys haven't seen this, but when I got the hoodie, I also got this. And now in the background, I'm fixing it so we can put these boards up. So that's Arknights and that's Dragon Ball Super. And I got to find a space for the One Piece one. Yeah, but that's where we are with the chapters, and we're going to be picking it up. I might be taking a little bit of a breather from One Piece. Reading it every week for a year was a lot. So I think I want to do a little bit of rereading of Berserk. I'm going to reread Berserk and give an opinion on that on the channel. I want to watch and give my opinions on Solo Leveling, which might have actually come out before this video. And I want to start Black Clover. We are not done with One Piece, but it might turn into every other week, depending on where I can find time to keep up with it. But I'm going to try to keep doing it weekly. So I want your opinion. Would you prefer every other week, 30 to 40 chapters? Or would you prefer weekly, but we reduce the chapter count and I cover maybe 20 chapters, 15 to 20? That way I can keep up that pace, but I can start bringing other content to Mangastorian. Reading this much One Piece every week on top of running Comicstorian and doing our podcast channel and doing our Twitch streams, it's a lot for me to try to cram in there. The size and pacing of One Piece, every chapter is basically a full issue of comic books. So I'm reading 30 to 40 comic books in one storyline every week. Then I have to read Batman, Superman, Spider-Man, Wolverine, and anything else going on that's important to the other channel. So I'm trying to figure out a pacing that will allow me to get other content on this channel. So would you prefer weekly still, but we go to 15 to 20 chapters, or would you prefer every other week and we do 30 to 40? Let me know in the comments down below. I appreciate all of your guys' support, and here's to looking forward to a great 2024. And yeah, thank you guys. I'll see you next time.